each one of you. Unless there's any aliens who kind of snuck in here, but you all look pretty human to me. My second qualification is that I am well qualified as a dad, and I'd just like to introduce you to my family. I have 5 beautiful daughters, and there's my wife, my long-suffering wife who allows me to goof off all through the year and go and travel and do these presentations. And this is one of the key reasons that I am pro-life. Because I have experienced what it is to help form a unique new human being. I have seen them developing in the womb. I have talked with my daughters as they grew. And I have been so amazed at what modern technology can now tell us about those 9 months in the womb. And there's one other qualification, and it comes back to geology. You know, as a geologist, my first 7 years was spent exploring all over the world in places like Antarctica. I traveled to the deserts of Western Australia looking for gold. I spent time in the Solomon Islands, flying around in a helicopter all day looking for precious minerals. From there I went to the jungles of Borneo, traveling up rivers for days on end, getting into the highlands of Borneo, again searching for precious minerals. From there I traveled to the deserts of Namibia, and I worked 1.5 years up on the Angolan border, searching for lead, zinc, copper and silver. And after that I spent 3 years in South Africa, again searching for precious minerals, including diamonds. And don't we all love diamonds? Especially the ladies. Whoa, these things are really special. But you realize in South Africa, this is where they found the world's largest diamond. Well, now it's the second largest, but at the time it was found, it was by far the largest diamond. It was the Cullinan. And it was so big, they cut it into several pieces. And this is the largest piece. Cullinan 1, the great star of Africa. And you realize this diamond is valued at about 400 million US dollars. 400 million. So I've got a lot of experience in looking for precious things. But the most precious thing of all that I'm going to show you today is not a chunk of carbon. Oh no. It's how you were formed. So that's enough background. You know where I've come from now. You know how far I've traveled to get here. You know what my qualifications are, and you know what my qualifications are not. So it's time to move on, because I don't want to talk anymore about me. I want to talk about you. This is your story today. It's the story of how you were formed, and I'm going to invite you on a journey back in time. And we're going to begin our journey right here, at birth. And I'm sure you've all done enough biology to know that, hey, this is not where it starts. But this is where I'm going to start today, because I want everyone to be on the same page. And when I speak to some people, they are not pro-life necessarily. But at this point in time, they all agree with me when I make the extraordinary claim that this is a human being. And almost no one argues with me. But if there's anyone here today who wants to argue with me about that one, please do stay behind, because we have a lot of catching up to do. For the rest of you, you'll all agree with me. This is a human. Needs protection, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in New Zealand, or whether you're from Ireland, to be sure. No one really argues too much, except Peter Singer and a few other people, that this point of development, you deserve protection from the laws of your land. Of course, today I want to make this presentation realistic, and you all know that that's not how babies come out, right? They don't come out looking like that. No, well, I've spent a lot of time working with specialists, with doctors, with midwives, with nurses, and with literally hundreds of mums, making sure they get the facts straight, and that the photos are accurate and realistic. And that is not realistic, because when you were born, you did not look like that. No, you looked more like this. Varying shades of brown. Basically, we all come out looking like that. And it's really funny, when I go into the public school system, a common reaction I get when I show that picture is, ooh, yuck. Ooh, yuck. And I challenge them on that. I say, aren't you glad that when you were born, your parents didn't respond that way? I mean, just imagine you've only just arrived, and your parents look at you and go, "Ah, yuck! Can we put this one back? Can I get an exchange card with this one?" No, you know, I bet your parents looked at you and they went, "Whoa!" Or maybe they looked at you and went, "Awesome!" You think Reverend Pat's the only one who can be loud? We do loud in New Zealand. Not just in the rugby stadiums. But I want you to know that even if your parents didn't respond that way, even if they did not go, "Wow," or "Awesome," your God responded that way. Your God looks at you and he just goes, "Wow." Maybe he even goes, "Awesome." Because he just loves you so much. And he knows how he designed you. He created you for a purpose. He looks at you and he just loves you to bits. And if we look at this from a scientific perspective, I want to give you some other reasons to know why we should think that you are just totally awesome. And there are many things I could share with you today about newborn babies and how incredible they are. But I just want to share one thing. Do you realize newborn babies are made up at birth of approximately 2 billion cells? 2 billion. And just 9 months before, there was only one cell, just one. After about 30 hours, that one cell divided into 2. And then they carried on dividing and dividing and making more and more cells until at birth you've got 2 billion of those things. And by the time you're fully grown, you'll have an estimated 100 billion cells in your body. 100 billion. You know, that's a pretty big number. Hey, most people can't get their head around that. But let me tell you, if you tried to count every cell in your body, it would take you 3 million years to finish the job. That's how many cells you've got. And each one of those cells is incredible. Do you realize cells are more complex than a city the size of Los Angeles? Cells have transportation networks. They have kind of freeways. They have communication systems. Cells have power plants. Cells have factories. They have bioengineering. They have machinery in there. Cells are phenomenally complex, and you have about 100 billion of those things? Whoa. You know, when I mentioned power generators, a lot of people go, "Oh, no, power generator. Hey, that guy's going too far. There surely aren't power generators in cells." Oh, yes, there are. We call them ATP synthase. And they were only discovered about 11 years ago. Here's why. These things are 200,000 times smaller than a pinhead. And yet, they produce all of the energy that you need to power those 100 billion cells in your body. And the reason cyanide is so good at killing people, because it stops the manufacture of ATP. And in your body, it's estimated you have about 10,000 billion rotary motors that can rotate at speeds of about 10,000 revolutions per minute. So are you fearfully and wonderfully made? Oh yeah, you sure are. And there are many other things I could share about cells, but I don't have a lot of time today, so I'm just going to hit on some of the key points. But now it is time for us to go into the womb. And technology helps us out here. You know, it gives us the ability to share all sorts of things. Oh, sorry, you know, there's one thing I was going to mention. In America, you make fantastic machinery, like the space shuttle. Even though this thing has been retired now, the space shuttle is still considered to be the most complex engineering marvel in the world, ever. And yet it's only made up of about 2.5 million components. So yeah, the space shuttle, this is very impressive. You should be proud of what your nation has achieved. But compared with the 100 billion components that make up you, this thing is a toy. Okay, let's go into the womb. What we're going to use is 3D 4D ultrasound to go back in time. We're going back 11 weeks into the 3rd trimester when this little tired person is getting ready for nap time. And I know many people will have seen ultrasound before, but I like to point out that yawning begins before birth. It's estimated that you will yawn about 100,000 times in your lifetime, but it begins before you were born. In fact, it begins really early on, and I'm going to talk about when it starts later on in the presentation. But at this moment, just think about this. There are many things that you begin to do in the womb that you will carry on doing outside the womb. You're not in some kind of coma while you're growing inside the womb. You're very active. You're growing rapidly. You're developing. You're interacting with the environment around you. There is so much going on inside the womb. And there is so much that is complete in the womb before you were born. So birth is not where it all begins. We have to go further back in time. And technology allows us to see in incredible detail how amazingly well made you are. You know, at this stage, 14 weeks before birth, you're about the size of my hand from head to the top of your legs, approximately the size of my hand. And even though you were so small, at this stage of development, 14 weeks before you're ready to be born, you are absolutely complete. You know, your eyes can already see in color. They can produce tears. Your sense of smell is fully operational, as is your sense of taste and touch. And your hearing. This stage of development, babies can hear what's going on outside the womb. In fact, they can tell the difference between their mother's voice and somebody else's voice. And you might be wondering, oh no, surely not. Yeah, I tell you. They're not cognitively thinking, oh, that's Mum talking and that must be my brother Jake. What they're doing is they're simply reacting to a voice they know really well. You know, they hear Mum's voice all the time. Mum's telling everyone about it. Oh, I'm pregnant. Yeah, okay, all right, great, nice. But then when somebody else starts talking, the baby recognizes the difference. And so this is why I love it when my wife is pregnant. I can talk to my daughters. I can interact with them. They can hear my voice. If I can get a word in edgeways. But you know, not only has technology delivered 3D 4D ultrasound and photographs taken inside the womb, they have now made tiny cameras and they've put them inside there. And as you all know from YouTube, you know, there's nowhere private on the planet anymore. Absolutely not. You can't even escape in the womb because they've got the cameras in there. This is the same stage of development. And these cameras don't deliver the quality of the imagery of the in utero photographs, but they're moving pictures. And don't you love moving pictures? There's your little button nose. Camera can now zoom in and look at your ear. Comes around and checks out your double chin, your lips. We can even see up your nostrils. And this little person is just relaxing and sleeping. And now we can go down and look at your lower foot, lower leg, and there's your big toe coming into view. And of course that white thing in the background, that's the amniotic sac. Because as you're probably aware, you grow inside a little bag which protects you. Surrounded in fluid, you are safe and sound in there, unless you live in a country with abortion. But now I just want to change speed a little bit and share a couple of true life stories. And I don't know about you, but I love true stories. I'm telling my daughters stories all the time. I like to make up stories, but their favorite stories from Dad are the true ones. And I bet a lot of you are already aware of Samuel Amar's amazing true story. But if you have not heard the story before, I'm just going to give you a brief rundown. Samuel Amar was born in America here in December 1999. And his story is truly amazing because while he was growing inside his mum, he had an operation. Why did he need that? Well, he was suffering from spina bifida, which basically means there's an opening at the base of his spine that's not supposed to be there. And if they didn't operate on him, he would have to have a lot of operations after he was born. But when he was growing inside the womb, the technology had been developed which enabled doctors to open up and do surgery in utero. And this technology was actually developed in New Zealand. Sir William Liley is a name that many doctors know of, a New Zealand specialist in this area. And he did the first blood transfusion for a baby in utero. And they took that knowledge that Sir William had gained to do this operation. And again, and a lot of you will have seen this photograph, you know, during the operation, Michael Clancy took this incredible shot of Samuel's hand reaching out from the womb and grasping the surgeon's finger. And you know, if they had taken Samuel right out of the womb, the crazy thing is the law in New Zealand and the law in the United States would have said, oh, we have a person here. We have a human being. But then if they'd put him back into the womb, they would have said, oh, I'm sorry, he is no longer a person. In, out, person, non-person, non-person. How crazy is the law? But we know the reality. Regardless of what the law says, we recognize the humanity of the unborn and that the rest is illegal nonsense. You know, one last thing before I move on from this picture. The bottom left, and I'm not sure why my laser pointer is not working, or maybe it just doesn't, oh, I know, there it goes. That's an ovary, and this here, if you can see it, that's the fallopian tube. We're going to come back to that later on. Okay, second true life story. This is another one from the United States. Amelia Taylor, born in Florida in 2006, and I'll bet many people already know her story. But isn't it incredible that she was born extremely prematurely and she survived? This was taken on her second birthday party, and of course you know it's going to be a happy story with a happy ending. You know, she looks pretty good condition there, right? But it didn't always start that way, because for some reason Amelia came extremely early. And I wonder if anyone here today knows if they were born prematurely. Raise your hand if you were born prematurely. Yeah, a few of you know you were born early. There's probably a few more of you, but you don't necessarily know. You need to go and ask Mum and Dad. Was I born prematurely? I want to give you some background now, and I've talked to a gynecologist obstetrician about prematurity. And this particular gentleman from New Zealand, he's been practicing as a gynecologist obstetrician for 36 years. And he explained to me that when he began working as a specialist, if a baby was born 2 months early, you would be approximately this size. And he said back then, this was the earliest they could keep you alive. 2 months early. He said if you were born earlier than that, they didn't know how to take care of them. They didn't know exactly how to care for these little preemies as they do now. And so this would be the earliest, this would be the age of viability. But now, he said 36 years later, they can keep babies alive on a pretty regular basis a whole month earlier. 3 months premature is now the age of viability. But sadly, if you're born earlier than that, you have almost no chance of survival. Not because you're not complete, you are, but because you are just too small and too immature. And they just haven't got the technology to take care of you, except in some very rare cases. And Amelia was one of those. Because she was born not 2 months early or 3 months early, she was born 4 months early. So she had only been in the womb for 5 months. And I'm sure again, when I hold up the next fetal model, it's the size of Amelia Taylor at birth, you won't be surprised. But when I hold this up in the public schools, there is a collective gasp. When I say that Amelia Taylor at birth was this size, they can't believe it. That you could possibly survive when you are that small. But you know it's true, don't you? Yep. 19.5 weeks after conception, you are complete. Everything's there. This is not some kind of blob. Physiologically, everything is intact. You are a complete little person. And of course, it's not good to be born premature. This is not a good idea. But there is one advantage of being born prematurely. When it is time to leave the hospital, it's great. You can just pop them in the pocket and off you go home. No, they don't do too bad. Now, I often deal with skeptics in my presentations, and when I hold up the Amelia Taylor fetal model, they go, no, I don't believe that. She couldn't possibly have been that small. So I have to show them this photograph. This was Amelia just after birth. And of course, down the front there, that black thing is a pen. That is a pen. So Amelia really was that small. Well, it's time to carry on back in time because, you know, we don't have much time left. But at this stage of development, 24 weeks before birth, or 14 weeks after conception, you were only the size of my palm from head to the top of the legs. This is incredibly small. But do you realize this is when you get your fingerprints? And those fingerprints remind us that you are absolutely one of a kind on the planet. There are roughly 7 billion people inhabiting our planet now, and every single one of them is one of a kind. And our fingerprints remind us of that, as do our irises. You know, the pattern on your iris is unique to you. Your skin pattern is unique to you. Your heart beats a little bit differently to everybody else's heart. And of course, most of those 100 billion cells in your body contain a copy of the genetic recipe that sets you apart from everybody else. And there are many other things that are complete at this stage. You know, inside your mouth you already have teeth growing inside the gums. You have taste buds. You have pain sensors. Girl babies have all of their eggs. But you know what? Here's a fun thing. In your face you already have 28 muscles which help us with talking, eating, and making different facial expressions. And you know, someone has worked out with those 28 muscles you have in your face already present from this stage of development, you can make approximately 250,000 different facial expressions. How incredible is that? You are indeed fearfully and wonderfully made. And you are also extremely well made for movement. And movement begins very early on, as I'm sure most of you are aware. Here is an ultrasound taken just 10 weeks after conception. And watch as this little girl goes through her exercise routine. If you haven't seen this before, maybe you didn't realize that 10 weeks you could be jumping up and down. And this, they called her George. They didn't know it was a girl at the time. And many of you will possibly know George's story. But what she's doing now, she's crouching down to the bottom of the womb, and from there, she's using Mum like a trampoline. Poor old Mum. And I have a lot of fun with the public school children. I say to them, you know, how many people think Mum would feel that sort of movement? And all the hands go up. Oh, for sure, Mum will feel this. I mean, how could you miss it, right? There's stuff going on down there. But then I have to say to them, bah, wrong answer. Mum won't feel that. I've talked to thousands of mums over the years, and they tell me that they almost never feel movement before 14 weeks. This is 10 weeks post-conception. Mum's not going to feel that. And then the first time mums tell me it's normally 2 months after this, before they feel movement. And the question has to be asked, what on earth is wrong with these women? Why can't they feel that? Well, there's nothing wrong with women. There's nothing wrong with Mum. It's just that you are very small. And for the people at the back, you're not going to be able to see this because inside my container here, I have 4 fetal models, and the largest one is the 10-week fetal model. And so for the people up front, you might be able to see, yep, here's my 10-week fetal model. And again, this will not be news for many of you. But in the public school system, they don't share all the facts, necessarily. And so when they look at this and go, wow, you mean I was that size when I could jump up and down inside Mum? Yeah, you were. And of course, you were complete even earlier on. Because when you were just about that size, physiologically, you were deemed to be complete. Yeah, the doctors changed your name from embryo to fetus. And you know those doctors, you think, man, couldn't they come up with a nicer name than that? Embryo and fetus? Yuck! Yeah, no, but they're great names. Embryo is a Greek word, which means to grow. And that's what you're doing. In the first 8 weeks, you are doing your most significant growth. The biggest changes happen in those first 8 weeks. So embryo is a great name. After 8 weeks, they call you a fetus. Fetus. Yuck! That's an ugly name. But actually it's a really great name because it's a Latin word which means little one or offspring. And from 8 weeks, that's what you are. You know, you have 4,000 of your 4,500 body parts by the 8th week. Physiologically, everything is there. Every structure found in an adult's body is found in a little fetus when you're only this size. And we're going to now go into the embryonic stage of development as we begin to wind down towards the end of this journey. But before we do, I have a question for you all. This business of a baby jumping in the womb, does that ring any bells from the most popular book on the planet? Have you ever read in the Bible about a baby leaping in the womb? Oh, yes, you have. Absolutely. In the Gospel of Luke. Isn't this fantastic? You know, Mary has just been visited by an angel. And she's been totally freaked out. You're going to have the Son of God. Whoa! And of course, being a typical woman, she has to go and share the news with another woman. So she races off to visit relative Elizabeth, and she enters the village and comes to Elizabeth's house and calls out a greeting. Hi there! Well, she probably said it in Aramaic, but you know, you get the drift, right? When Elizabeth, who was 6 months pregnant with John the Baptist, heard that greeting, you know what she said? Oh! I felt my baby leap in the womb. And over the years, the people think, oh, you know, the Bible's so poetic. It's not describing what actually is happening inside the womb, though. Well, oh, yes, it is. 2,000 years before we have ultrasound, the Bible is describing something in very accurate terms, and Dr. Luke recorded it for us. And it's just a reminder, in terms of observational science, the Bible is 100% accurate. But let's carry on now. We're going into the embryonic stage, and this is just 6 weeks after conception when you're only the size of an adult's thumbnail. From your head to the top of your legs, that's how small you are. Man, this is really tiny. But this is not some kind of blob. Do you realize this is when brain waves have been detected? I'm sure you knew that. This is when movement starts to occur. And of course you have a beating human heart right in there. So you're only the size of a thumbnail, but you've got brain waves, a beating heart, and movement. This is incredibly early. And the outside pretty bits, you know, they'll come later. But inside, the main structures have already been laid down. And as we look at a video taken from just a little bit earlier than this, we can see that there are many things that are not yet complete. But on the inside, you are essentially complete already. This is only 5 weeks after conception, and that little eye doesn't have eyelids and eyelashes and eyebrows, but on the inside, the eye is just about complete. And there's your little foot. By the way, it's not a flipper. I have lots of public school children who say, oh, it's a fish. No, this is not the fish. This is 100% human, and we can see a human heart beating at this stage. But it does kind of freak them out. They look at this and they're kind of like, oh, you know, I used to look like that. And then I say to them, well, if you think that's weird, you wait till my next picture. And then I show them this one. And they go, what is that? I say, oh, this is you. They go, no, no way, no way. And the reason, I've worked it out. I worked out why in our public school system people are surprised when I put up that picture. Is because they had this idea that they were always good looking. That's so conceited. And they look and they say, no way, man, I was always just look good, right? No, no, once upon a time, in your pre-cute stage of development, that's what you look like. But then I go and explain to them, hey, let's not judge hastily here. I don't know about you, but I don't like being judged by appearances. I want people to get to know me before they decide I'm a jerk, right? So let's look a bit closer here. You know, even though this is just 3 weeks after conception, you are only 3 millimeters tall, and yet in those 3 weeks, you have increased in size 10,000 times. You've gone from 1 cell to millions of cells already. And inside here is a beating human heart. Oh yes, your heart began to beat just 22 days after conception. Isn't that incredibly early? And sure, all the pretty bits aren't there yet. They'll come later on. You know, your lovely face is under construction, but you can't make a face as good looking as yours in only 3 weeks. It takes a bit longer. Faces are very intricate. But on the inside, the main structures have all been laid down already. And you're only 3 millimeters tall. Well, I mentioned that heart was beating, and again, for the skeptics, I have to back that one up with the video evidence. Here it is. This is taken 4 weeks after conception, when your heart is only the size of a pinhead. Just a pinhead. Of course, now, your heart is about the size of your fist. It sits about here. And do you realize what an amazing job your heart is doing? Oh, yeah. Your heart is pumping blood through a circulation system that is roughly long enough to go 2.5 times around our planet. Yeah, it's about 100,000 kilometers long. Think about that. Think about that, especially when you're choosing what you eat. Because, you know, we don't want to clog up the plumbing with a whole bunch of fatty food, because then that poor old heart of yours is eventually going to have a heart attack. So please do take care of your heart. Your heart also is fearfully and wonderfully made. But now, we're going to have to leave the womb. All the images I've been showing you up to now have been taken inside the womb. And this is a cross-section through the womb. We're just seeing half of it. But this is not where life begins. I know even in the pro-life movement, we talk about life beginning inside the womb. But no, that's not medically accurate. Life, for almost everyone, begins up the fallopian tube. This little thing I'll just show you the photograph from the Samuel R. Marr picture. Remember, I pointed out the fallopian tube. There it is on the right-hand side. It's only 2 millimeters wide, and it's a very tiny little narrow tube. But that is where life begins for almost everyone. And now, I want to take you up that tube and show you where it all began. And so we'll start off as you begin to leave the fallopian tube and look for a place to implant. And in this photograph on the left-hand side, down the bottom, are approximately 100 cells which are rapidly dividing every 10 to 12 hours, building you. And up on the right-hand side, there is something else being built. It's not part of you. This is the placenta and the umbilical cord being put together. It's an amazing plumbing system which enables you to connect up to mum. And it's a two-way system. Not only is mum sending you nutrients and oxygen, but you are sending chemicals into her bloodstream, which will change her body in literally thousands of different ways. Pregnancy is indeed a life-transforming experience. As we carry on up the fallopian tube, this is 3 days after conception, and this is a collection of about 6 to 8 cells in the middle there, and they're also dividing very rapidly, laying down the foundations of a new little person. And it takes you about a week to travel down that fallopian tube. And you're not connected to mum, so you might be wondering, do I have to fast for the first week of my life? You know, where do the meals come from? Well, don't worry, because God packed you a lunch. Can you see those little cells clustering around the outside? They're called nutrient cells. They cluster around you and they feed you for that first week of your life. And so everything is designed to maximize your chances of survival. And now we're going to complete our journey at the top of the fallopian tube at this amazing time called conception or fertilization. Same thing. And in this photograph we have an egg or an ovum, which is obviously provided by mum. And inside there is a tiny little nucleus containing half of the genetic instructions for the making of you. But of course it's only half. You see, we guys do have some uses. I know sometimes you wonder about that. But the second nucleus in that photograph comes from Dad, containing the second half of the genetic instructions for making you. And over a period of hours, those two nuclei come together until they touch. That's what you're seeing now. Then the membrane between them just dissolves away. And those two sets of genetic instructions come together. And they fix. And that is the precise moment when human development begins. Before that, we do not have a human being. We simply have two sets of instructions. But after this moment, all of the information for the making of you is together in one place at one time. And if we could read that information, we would already know whether you're going to be a boy or a girl. We would know whether you're going to be tall or short, whether you're going to have brown hair or red hair or blonde hair, whether you're going to have wavy hair, straight hair, eye color, all of those things, they're fixed from the moment of conception. And all that really happens after conception is we simply follow those instructions to build that new little person. And this is not up for debate anymore. You know, the biologists have been in accordance with this for years now. Human development begins at conception. But you know what the debate is now? It's about the value of what has been created. But as to what has been created, there is no argument. It is a human being. And it's interesting that in the Bible, we read how even Jesus was created at this time. I'm going to come back to that. First of all, let's just point out a few things. You know, the geneticists now tell us that they've taken samples of the human genome from all over the planet, and the typical difference between human beings is just 0.2%. So I have a message for you today, ladies and gentlemen. We are all members of the human family here on the planet. We do not have some people who are more human than others. We are all 99.9.8% genetically identical. And that should remind us of something very special, that we are all members of the human race. And as I said, in the Bible,